worst traffic in the country.
Tunnels all jammed up. Stop and go to and
commute
from
from
Boston.
could have been avoided if the state had a foresight to invest in public transportation
the
over
city,
the past
might
few
as well
decades.
connect the two stations.
That the MBTA is a mess.
leg of the Green Line extension
waiting for this
also
for about
serves
34 years.
Many say the T has a lot more to do.
That is clean. Orange line, I'm looking at
take
you.
a lot of years to
They
fix
wish
them
they
as
did
well,
not
and
have
the
to
FCC
drive.
They don't have a choice.
So, how did we get here? As car dominance and massive federally supported highway construction in the 1950s and 60s proved problematic in the Boston metropolitan area, causing state leaders to reemphasize public transportation, the expansions of the MBTA's rapid transit system implemented in the 1970s and 80s shifted the frontier of rapid transit service in the Boston area, helping to make public transit more prominent and creating long-lasting socioeconomic effects on communities. However, the inconsistent realization of many planned projects has caused uneven urban development and failed to fully address the region-wide transportation problems still faced today. In 1947, the Metropolitan Transit Authority was established as a government agency to consolidate Boston area transit by absorbing operations from the privately owned Boston Elevated Railroad Company. That year, a legislative commission led by then-Lieutenant Governor Arthur W. Coolidge planned to expand electric rapid transit to 29 cities and towns surrounding Boston. The commission sought to divert commuters from using cars and adding to traffic congestion in downtown. Nonetheless, urban planning in the 1950s centered around building highways connecting suburbs to cities. Under President Eisenhower, the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 allocated $25 billion to construct the interstate highway system. This led to vast highway construction in Metro Boston, including the elevated Interstate 93 Central Artery that cut through neighborhoods in Chinatown and the North End, displacing thousands of families. This was typical of a nationwide pattern of destroying economically disadvantaged neighborhoods to build highways. The new highways quickly became gridlocked, worsening congestion in downtown Boston. As these projects continued, community leaders began to realize that even more highways might not be the answer to the transportation crisis, as the city became overwhelmed with cars and parking facilities. As more people bought cars and moved to the suburbs, an example of the post-war suburbanization taking place on a national level, ridership on the MTA and railroads dropped, leading to fare hikes and service cuts that only made ridership fall further in a vicious cycle. While a few planned rapid transit expansions took place, progress was hindered as revenue declined, and federal funds were instead allocated towards the highways that only worsened the situation for transit. The planned expansions did, however, establish precedent for various later proposals. The Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority succeeded the MTA in 1964 to address regional transit problems, integrating the urban transit services and struggling commuter railroads into one agency. That same year, President Johnson created the Urban Mass Transportation Administration to provide federal assistance for mass transit projects. In 1965, the MBTA submitted its first federal funding request for the modernization of 10 transit stations, and preliminary planning for other projects began. The newly formed MBTA tried to enhance its new image and recapture lost ridership via marketing campaigns. Meanwhile, there were proposals for further urban highway projects, such as an inner belt route cutting through Boston and Cambridge, with a disproportionate impact on multiracial and working-class neighborhoods. Community resistance and organization grew, culminating in thousands demonstrating at the State House against the project. In response to the protests, Governor Francis Sargent declared a moratorium on Metro Boston highway construction in 1970 and called for a comprehensive study of the region's transportation needs, appointing the Boston Transportation Planning Review to advise his policy. In a 1972 address, he acknowledged the disastrous impacts of the highways, attributed transit's condition to its long-running neglect, and announced the study's resulting investment plan.
In the end, we will have invested nearly $2 billion, and we will have created a real and workable alternative to the increasingly damaging use of the automobile.
He prioritized the MBTA while making the highway moratorium permanent. The state gained a provision in the Federal Aid Highway Act that allowed cities to redirect highway funds to transit. The plan included $1.2 billion to expand rapid transit service, build parking garages at terminals, and upgrade existing infrastructure. Transit expansions were planned, many along the former intended paths of expressways. It also originated the idea of submerging the Central Artery, what would later become the infamous Big Dig. During the 1970s and 80s, gas shortages, air quality concerns, and urban congestion led to increased ridership on the MBTA, and it began to be seen as a primary form of transportation. Plans from the Boston Transportation Planning Review and other projects began to be carried out using the redirected federal funding. During these decades, the Red Line was extended at both ends, and 2 elevated rail lines were replaced with Orange Line extensions, redefining the frontier of rapid transit access in the area. While these projects helped to re-emphasize transit, some plans were cut short or not started during this period. Highway lobbyist opposition inhibited approval of bonds to finance projects, and while the federal government began funding transit, it was still at a fraction of what was spent on roads. Race also played a role in what was built, as discrimination and redlining influenced these projects. Community opposition to a potential red line extension was especially strong in Arlington. Initial debate centered on whether to allow the line to temporarily end at Arlington Center pending further expansion. Unprecedented federal funding was secured for the project, but local opposition intensified. A campaign by the Arlington Red Line Action Movement led to voters rejecting the plan, cutting the line short at Alewife Station. Opponents claimed the extension would destroy the town's residential character by bringing in outsiders, a discriminatory perspective in this mostly white town. Not in my backyard attitude around transit expansion was also present in Quincy.
And others hinted darkly at the two-way traffic that would bring inner-city residents, blacks, to live in the suburbs.
But in that case, the opposition was overcome. As the Big Dig began in the 1990s, multiple public transit projects were included as part of its environmental mitigation. While some were built, such as the Silver Line bus rapid transit through the seaport to Logan Airport via tunnels, others were severely delayed, such as the Green Line extension to Medford finally opened in 2022. Many promised projects remain unbuilt, such as a red and blue line connection and a north to south station rail link, prevailing examples of neglect for important public transit projects. Subway expansions had and continue to have important impacts on communities in their path, one being economic activity and revitalization, but also gentrification. For example, the 1984 opening of the Red Line at Davis Square led to drastic economic transformation in the neighborhood, causing rising property values that pushed many working-class immigrant families from the neighborhood. A transition from blue-collar working-class families to post-grad hipsters wearing pork pie hats in search of craft beers. Quincy saw a reversal of an economic decline caused by shutdowns in industries like shipbuilding, keeping the city relevant. Beyond the complex socioeconomic impacts of transit expansions on communities, inclusion within this frontier provided invaluable mobility for residents by providing fast, accessible connections to their destinations. Inconsistent expansion of the rapid transit frontier resulted in vast differences between communities on either side of the frontier. For example, the shortened Red Line expansion delayed urban change in Arlington, and while the town's housing costs have still risen considerably, the lack of diversity in affordable housing, general socioeconomic isolation, and opposition to a Mass Ave redevelopment project show that this same exclusionary attitude prevails today. In contrast to Somerville's unmistakably gentrified, trendy Davis Square, an area included in the 1980s Red Line extension, neighborhoods like East Somerville, while not unchanged, maintain greater diversity and hold on to more of their long-standing working-class population. If history is any indication, this status could face expedited change as the finally constructed Green Line extension into Somerville influences the neighborhoods in its path. Different side effects were had when the Washington Street elevated line was taken down in favor of a rerouted Orange Line expansion in 1987. The rerouted service removed rapid transit from neighborhoods in Roxbury and the South End, including centers like Roxbury's Dudley Square, putting this area on the other side of the transit frontier. The change took away a lifeline for many residents and gave the neighborhood an uncertain future. In 2002, the Silver Line bus rapid transit was introduced, branded as providing an equal or better replacement, but it has been considered far inferior by many. Inconsistent attainment of transit projects planned in the past has left the Boston area with unresolved transportation problems, many remaining to this day. If past plans had been fully realized, Jared Johnson suggests that Boston would be less dependent on cars, reducing the issues posed by high gas prices and traffic. A more complete shift to transit could have addressed these continuing problems of car dominance. These issues are perpetuated by the incomplete expansion of the transit frontier and the absence of vital connections still being pushed for today. Recent transportation issues have echoed those of Boston in the 50s and 60s. Ridership has still not returned to pre-pandemic levels, while roadway traffic has already surpassed them. Eventually, more will need to use public transit, but when it isn't widespread, reliable, and affordable, people won't choose it. Getting transit to this place is hindered by the lack of vital expansions and exacerbated by other long-running issues at the MBTA. Recent management, safety, and operations problems negatively impact those who rely on the system and encourage those with a choice away from transit, worsening the region's car problems in a time when climate change is a more urgent issue than ever. Stacey Thompson, the executive director of Livable Streets Alliance, says,
"How do we make expansion improvements while we are trying to get the existing system to run smoothly is sort of the quintessential problem for the MBTA to solve."
The recent opening of the Green Line extension to Medford is a good sign for continuing to expand the frontier of rapid transit access where it's been left off. As Boston continues to grapple with its transit problems, a new state administration and MBTA leadership have their opportunity to prioritize prioritize transit and generate solutions. But this is only one piece to the collaborative, reinvigorated approach needed for a better, more sustainable transportation future in Metro Boston.